Hello, I'm James Everett. I'm the voice behind the sports desk at Clockwork News. I'm also a co-producer of Clockwork Radio Productions. When we asked our target audience what they wanted, they responded that they didn't really listen to local news and as such didn't know how to improve it. So we as producers didn't know how to improve it, so we felt it best to leave it as a tried and trusted structure. So we've got the main news and then we've got the sport, and the only thing we did change was that after the sport comes the human interest story, and that was only because we felt that we wanted to end it on a really light note rather than doing all the news, ending on a light note and then go into sport, which you never know, the sport can be hard hitting as well, so we wanted to end it on an extremely light note. We haven't really stereotyped the audiences. I think it's just that when we asked them, they said that they wanted more sports and more entertainment, so we've put them in as opposed to leaving them out. And though it does really sound rather cliche, we put in a story about the college, which would more likely interest people of that age group and that specific target audience, because the college is part of their lives at the moment, perhaps. Who would buy it? That's a hard one. Well, first of all, it wouldn't be the BBC because it's far too chatty to be a BBC product, and it, second of all, it's far too informal. I think who wouldn't be interested in it would be, for the stories, would be local stations, and for the feel of it would be music stations. I mean, we've got music beds running throughout and stings, so it's very much for a music-based radio station rather than a speech-based station. We decided to stick with what we know. So as our target audience, we used 16 to 30-year-olds because that's what age group we're in, so we know what they want. But also, we sent out questionnaires and did interviews and things, and we found what they wanted, and it was very similar to what we thought they'd want. And so we've very much just gone for a younger audience, into more entertainment, into more sport, into video games, into music, and it's a very generic program from our point of view to them. To interest our audience, we kept a very simple structure, and I think the language is rather informal and chatty because that's the way they would speak to each other as opposed to how the radio would speak to them. So I think that's how we tried to sort of attract them to this particular radio show, because we wanted it to be speaking to them, really. And I think the stories helped as well because there's more entertainment. They tend to be more 16-year-olds tend to be more interested in entertainment and sport, and there's more of them stories than any other type of news in there. So I think the music beds also helped because stereotypically that age range of 16 to 30-year-olds are more interested in music. So there's a lot going on dynamically with the music into enticing audiences into listening to this show rather than another one. Well, we've learnt from doing this, especially some of the technological stuff. It just gives you a little taste of what it's like, and it's certainly very different from what I expected in the least. I mean, writing scripts, I came in with a huge chunk and had to break it up because it's hard to read it to flow into what you're saying as a newsreader, and it's very difficult to do that with a giant block of text to read. I think also I've really learnt how to conduct interviews and vox pops. When we wanted to do an interview, we wanted to go to the location that we were going to do it and just nab someone, and you find it very difficult because maybe there's not that many people there, so you can't grab them to do it. And that was very difficult for us. We had to arrange one at a later date, I think. You also learn that it takes time. It takes time, a lot of time, to make these things. Perhaps you don't have a lot of time, especially not when you're making news, because it needs to be out there within that day, certainly, perhaps even within that hour or so. And so it's very different to making other types of media. You also learn what sounds right, perhaps where it looks right written down on a script, it doesn't sound right, and you also learn who sounds right for reading on the radio that perhaps you didn't expect, or you expected something different. And it's very different. You can't just cut bits of text out and put it into a script, because it doesn't work like that. Levels of music are also important, because if you get a level of a bed and a level of a track very radically wrong, it can completely mess up the rest of the program, and that's not what we wanted. And I think we've learned the hard way that levels and all that, it's very difficult to do that and very tedious, but it's not something that I would change, because making it has been very enjoyable. But it's certainly a learning experience. Doing the preliminary task, it really gives you a feel of what it's like to make a radio program, so that you're more prepared for doing the main radio news task. I mean, doing the preliminary, it gives you a taste of what it's like to be in the studio. It gives you an idea of what language and what ideas work on radio. For example, I think I went in with a massive block of script, and it wasn't separated out, and it's really hard to read it as it flows onto the radio as well. And other things it gives you is a chance to experience what the technology is like. It also gives you an idea that you should research these things rather than just going in there blind and recording it. And I think you can learn a great deal from doing practice runs beforehand. And a way in which it differs from the main news program is that you really get a taste for who sounds better on radio, so perhaps you can choose who can do that. And I think you get a taste of how music works as a bed, really, as a background noise. And sometimes it works well and sometimes it doesn't. It depends on the piece of music. So we've gone with quite peaceful, quiet sounds after hearing some of the preliminary stuff, where there was really loud, heavy music, and it didn't really go with the speech patterns. And so perhaps we've learnt from that for doing our news program. I think we have achieved what we wanted to do with it, and from my point of view, it sounds a lot better than I thought. It was a lot more professional. Who knows? Maybe sometime in the future, someone will revive the brand and Clockwork will become an official company. Well, there's the hope anyway.